When you hear the word hell, you probably picture fire, demons, eternal punishment, maybe even a horned red figure. But that image mostly comes from medieval Christian art and isn't very old. In reality, every culture imagined what comes after death differently. Some envisioned something worse than fire, others something more terrifying than punishment, and some nothing at all. This is the real story of hell, and some of these visions will stay with you whether you believe in them or not.
Why hell is so similar and so different in every civilization?
Let's start with something really weird. Once you notice it, almost every civilization decided that when you die, you go somewhere specific, based on geography, rules, beings who enforce them, and, especially, a journey there. Just so you know, the Greeks called it Hades, while the Norse called hell and Valhalla. Egyptians have their Duat, at the same time the Aztecs have their Mictlan. I know it can be a lot, but the Hindus had Naraka and the Japanese, Yomi. Not to blow your mind with that much knowledge, but the Mesopotamians had Kur, while the Celts believed in Unwin and the Maori Harenga. However, when you compare them, you start to notice three things. First, you notice how different they are. With the Greek underworld being gray and silent, the Norse being cold and neutral. The Duat containing 12-gate obstacles with a monster at the end, while Mictlan leads you through 9 levels. Second, you notice how similar they are in ways it shouldn't be, especially with the civilizations being apart for that much time, and, of course, with almost all of them having a river to cross. Thirdly, when you understand all these look-alike places, you'll realize how the word hell, as we know, is the least interesting. And no, I've never went there to say that, but let's be honest, the others are way better developed. Don't worry, we'll go through them properly because I'm sure some of them will change how you think about death itself.
Part 1. The Universal Standard.
Before we get into the specific underworlds, let's talk about what they all have in common, because the overlaps between completely separate traditions are the most disturbing part of this whole story. And before we do, if you've watched Record of Ragnarok on Netflix, you've already seen a version of this. The entire premise of that show is gods from completely different mythologies existing in the same space. Zeus, Thor, Shiva, Hades, Poseidon, Buddha, all in the same tournament. It works as entertainment because the writers understood something real. These traditions, as different as they are, share enough structural DNA that you can put them in the same room and it doesn't feel wrong. Here's why. The river is the first overlap. Almost every afterlife tradition in the ancient world includes a body of water the dead must cross. The Greeks had 5 rivers in the underworld: the Styx, the Acheron, the Lethe, the Phlegethon, and the Cocytus, each one with a different property. The Styx was the river of hate. The Lethe was the river of forgetfulness. Drink from it, and you lose all memory of your life. The Finnish had the Tuonela River, the Maori had a river in Rahanга, the Aztecs had a river in Mictlan that souls crossed with the help of a dog, which is why dogs were sometimes sacrificed at Aztec funerals to give the deceased a companion for the crossing. The Mesopotamians had the waters of death in the Epic of Gilgamesh. Different cultures, different continents, different centuries, the same river. The guardian at the entrance is the second overlap, Cerberus for the Greeks, the 3-headed dog, Garm for the Norse, also a dog, guarding Hell's Gate, Ammit for the Egyptians, waiting at the judgment, Mictlantecuhtli for the Aztecs, the skeletal lord at the lowest level, Yama for the Hindus and Buddhists, the judge of the dead. Dogs appear in multiple traditions as guardians or guides of the dead, independently. Without contact, the dog as companion of the deceased is one of the most consistent motifs across all afterlife mythology. The journey is the third overlap. Almost no ancient tradition describes death as instantaneous arrival. There is always a journey. The Egyptian soul travels through 12 gates across 12 hours of the night. The Aztec soul travels for 4 years through 9 levels, while the Greek soul is ferried across the river by Charon the ferryman. The Norse soul travels a long road to reach Hell's Gate. The Hindu soul is escorted by Yama's messengers, and the judgment is the fourth overlap. Most traditions include some form of evaluation, though the criteria and consequences vary enormously. what the Greek judges weighed, what the Egyptian feather measured, what Yama's records contained, all different things. But the idea that what you did in life determines what happens after death appears across traditions that had no way of knowing about each other. None of the explanations for why these overlaps exist is complete, and none of them fully accounts for the dog.
Part 2. The Greek Hades and the Tartarus.
Here is the thing most people get wrong about the Greek underworld. It's not a place of punishment, not for most people. If you've watched Saint Seiya Knights of the Zodiac, specifically the Hades saga, you've seen the most faithful depiction of the Greek underworld in the history of anime. The 12 prisons correspond to actual regions of Hades described in Greek texts. Rhadamanthus, Minos, and Iolcus are not invented characters. They are exactly the three judges described by Plato in the Gorgias and by Virgil in the Aeneid. When the Gold Saints descend into the underworld, they walk through the same geography Homer described in the Odyssey. The show's creators did their homework, and what they depicted is considerably more disturbing than fire. Here's the actual structure. The Asphodel Meadows are where ordinary souls go, not the heroic dead, not the condemned, not the virtuous, just regular people who lived regular lives. And what do they do there? According to Homer in the Odyssey, they just wander. They don't speak unless given blood to drink. They have no memory, no purpose, no awareness of time passing. They simply exist in a kind of gray, purposeless drift that continues indefinitely. Not punishment, just nothing. The Elysian Fields are reserved for heroes and the exceptionally virtuous ones, a place of rest and beauty. The Isle of the Blessed One tier further is for those who achieve Elysium 3 consecutive times through reincarnation. Plato describes this system in his dialogues. Pindar describes it in his odes, a tiered paradise that requires repeated excellence across multiple lives to reach the highest level. And then there is Tartarus. Tartarus is where the Greek tradition gets genuinely creative about suffering. Tantalus stands in a pool of water beneath fruit trees. Every time he reaches for the fruit, it rises beyond his grasp. Every time he bends to drink, the water recedes. For eternity, his crime: he killed his son Pelops and served him to the gods at a feast to test whether they were truly omniscient. The punishment is exquisitely calibrated, forever reaching for sustenance that is forever withdrawn. Sisyphus rolls a boulder up a hill. Every time it reaches the top, it rolls back down. His crime: he cheated death twice. Once by trapping Thanatos in chains so that no one could die, and once by convincing Persephone to let him return to the living world. He was clever enough to escape death twice. The punishment for that specific cleverness is perpetual meaningless labor. Ixion is bound to a spinning wheel of fire. Each punishment in Tartarus is specific to the crime that earned it. Someone designed these punishments, someone matched the torment to the transgressor with deliberate precision. And the three judges of the underworld, Minos, Rhadamanthus, and Iolcus, are exactly who Saint Seiya depicted them as. Former kings and real figures from Greek legend, Minos has the final vote. His presence as a judge is itself disturbing, given that, in life, he was involved in the story of the Minotaur, a being kept in a labyrinth and fed human sacrifices. The justice system of the Greek underworld is administered by men who were not themselves just.
Part 3. The Egyptian Duat.
The Egyptian afterlife is the most elaborate death bureaucracy ever devised by any civilization in human history. If you've watched Yu-Gi-Oh!, especially the original series and the movie, you've encountered a version of this. Anubis appears as the antagonist in Yu-Gi-Oh! The movie. And the entire aesthetic of Egyptian mythology in that franchise, the gods, the judgment system, the visual language of the afterlife, draws directly from the tradition we're about to describe. The show's Egyptian arc is one of the most mythology-dense sequences in mainstream anime, but the real version is considerably more specific. The Book of the Dead, which in Egyptian is called the Book of Coming Forth by Day, is essentially a guidebook, a manual for navigating the afterlife. The Egyptians buried their dead with it because they believed the dead would need the instructions, the spells, the passwords, the specific things to say at each of the 12 gates to get through. When you die, your soul, specifically the part called the Ba, begins a journey through the Duat. The Duat is experienced at night. Simultaneously with Ra's solar bark traveling through the 12 hours of darkness, while Ra fights the serpent Apophis each night to ensure the sun rises, the dead are making their own journey through the same territory. There are 12 gates, each guarded by a deity and a specific monster. To pass through each gate, you have to know the name of the guardian. You have to recite specific spells. If you fail at any gate, the journey ends there. If you make it through all 12 gates, you reach the Hall of Two Truths, the weighing of the heart. Your heart is placed on one side of a scale. On the other side is the feather of Mat, the feather of truth and justice. Anubis operates the scale while Thoth records the result. And 42 assessors listen as you recite the negative confessions. I haven't stolen, I haven't killed, I haven't lied. These are examples of the 42 specific moral claims before the court of the dead. If your heart balances with the feather, you're good to go to the field of reeds, the perfect version of the world you left, where you'll live in abundance forever. However, if the heart is heavier than the feather, there are no second chances, as Amit will eat it right away. She does not torture you. She does not imprison you. She eats your heart. And when your heart is eaten, you cease to exist entirely. Not punishment, obliteration, the second death, the end of every part of you that ever existed. The Egyptians considered this worse than any punishment. Eternal torture at least implies eternal existence. The second death ends you completely and permanently.
Part 4. The Norse Hell and Valhalla.
Here is what most people get wrong about the Norse afterlife. There are multiple destinations, and the one called Hell is not a punishment. If you've watched Vinland Saga, one of the most historically and mythologically grounded anime about Norse culture ever made, you've seen this tension explored in real depth. The entire first arc of Vinland Saga is about what it means to die as a warrior versus what it means to die any other way. Thor's, Askeladd, Thorfinn, every major character's relationship with death is shaped by the Norse understanding that how you die determines where you go. The show doesn't explain this explicitly, it doesn't need to. It's built into every character's motivation. Here's why. Valhalla is the Hall of the Slain, where Odin gathers warriors who died in battle to prepare for Ragnarok. You feast, you fight, you feast again. Every day the warriors kill each other in training, and every evening they return to life to feast with Odin. It is specifically designed for one kind of death, death in battle, weapon in hand. What almost nobody mentions is that Freya gets there first. The prose EDA is explicit. Freya has the right to choose half the slain before Odin takes the other half. Her hall, Folkvanger, receives as many warriors as Valhalla. Odin is famous. Freya's half is almost never discussed. But Valhalla and Folkvanger are not where most Norse people went. Most Norse people went to Hell. Hell is ruled by a being of the same name, a daughter of Loki. Half living and half dead in appearance, her body divided between the color of flesh and the color of a corpse. She rules over all who die of illness, old age, or any cause that is not combat. She is not cruel. She is not punishing. She simply presides over a cold, gray, quiet realm where the dead exist without the warrior's glory that Valhalla represents. The Norse considered this the least desirable outcome, not because hell punishes you, but because hell is just there. No feasting with Odin, no preparation for the final battle, no glory, just a cold, gray existence in a realm described as having a hall called Elja Nir, which means misery, with a dish called hunger and a knife called famine. There is also Anestiar and the Shore of Corpses, where murderers, oathbreakers, and those who committed the most serious crimes against the social order end up a hall whose walls are woven from serpents, all pointing inward, dripping venom. The worst of the dead wade through rivers of venom on their way to Anestiar, and the closest the Norse tradition comes to a place of active punishment. Every death in Vinland Saga means something different depending on how it happened. That's not an artistic choice. That's the mythology working exactly as the prose Edda intended.
Part 5. Mictlan, the Aztec Underworld.
If you've seen Coco the Pixar film, you've seen the most faithful mainstream depiction of Aztec afterlife beliefs in Western popular culture. The emphasis on memory, on being remembered by the living. On the annual return during Dia de los Muertos, all of it drawn from genuine Aztec tradition. The film got it right in the ways that matter most. Here's what the original texts say. When an ordinary Aztec person died, they went to Mictlan, the 9-level underworld ruled by Mictlan Acutli and his wife Mictocasayatl. And here is the thing that separates Mictlan from every other afterlife tradition we've discussed. There is no moral judgment. You do not go to a different level based on how you lived. You do not earn a better destination through virtue. Every ordinary person makes the exact same 4-year journey through the exact same 9 levels, facing the exact same obstacles. The wind of obsidian knives, the jaguar, the field of wild wind, the place where there is no light, the ice, the river of blood, and finally the 9th level, where Mictlan Acutli waits and the soul finds rest. The only thing that helps you is preparation. Your family buries you with supplies for the journey. The quality of your preparation determines the ease of your passage, but not your virtue. The Aztec universe does not reward moral behavior with a better afterlife.
Part 6, Naraka, the Hindu and Buddhist Underworld.
If you've watched Yu Yu Hakusho, you've seen this tradition in anime form. Yusuke Urameshi dies and is escorted to the underworld, where he is judged by the son of Enma, the king of hell. Enma is Yama, the same judge who appears in Hindu and Buddhist texts, responsible for weighing the karma of the dead and determining their fate. The show's Underworld is a bureaucratic organization with laws and hierarchy, which is exactly how the texts describe Naraka, death as administration, judgment as procedure. The real Naraka is not eternal. That is the first and most important thing to understand. In Hindu and Buddhist traditions, the afterlife is temporary, a state between incarnations determined by karma. If your karma is negative, you go to Naraka for a period proportional to the severity of your actions. When the karmic debt is paid, you leave and reincarnate. What makes Naraka disturbing is not its permanence, but its specificity. The texts describe hundreds of specific hells for specific scenes. A person who killed animals for food goes to a hell where they are hunted by animals. A person who is dishonest in trade goes to a hell of burning measures and weights. Each punishment precisely calibrated to the sin that earned it.
Part 7, Yomi, the Japanese Afterlife.
And then there's Yomi. If you've watched Naruto, specifically the later arcs, you've seen Izanagi and Izanami used as techniques by the Uchiha clan. In the show, Izanagi is an ability that manipulates reality itself. Izanami is an ability that traps a victim in an infinite loop of the same events, forcing them to relive the same moment forever. These are not invented names. They are the actual names of the Japanese creation gods from the Kojiki, written in 712 AD, and the techniques are specifically designed to reflect what the gods did. Izanagi, the god, created reality. He and Izanami shaped Japan from the primordial sea. So Izanagi, the technique, manipulates reality. Izanami, the goddess, after her death, tried to trap Izanagi in Yomi forever. She chased him. She sent the dead after him. She tried to make him stay. So Izanami, the technique, traps the victim in an inescapable loop, the way she tried to trap her husband in the underworld. And the story behind those names is this. Izanagi and Izanami created Japan together. When Izanami died giving birth to the fire god, she went to Yomi. Izanagi, unable to accept her death, went to Yomi to bring her back. She told him to wait, not to look at her while she negotiated with the gods of Yomi for permission to leave. He looked. What he saw in the darkness was Izanami's body covered in maggots and decay. With 8 thunder gods born from her decomposing flesh, she felt his horror. She knew he had seen her, and she became something different. She vowed to kill 1,000 people per day. He fled. She chased him to the boundary between Yomi and the living world. He sealed the entrance with a boulder. She screamed at him from the other side that she would kill 1,000 of his people every day. He told her he would create 1,500 new lives for every 1,000 she killed. That exchange, 2 divine beings screaming at each other across a boulder, is why humans are mortal and why there are more births than deaths. The Kojiki explains the birth rate and the death rate with a broken promise and a look in the dark. Masashi Kishimoto didn't choose those names randomly. He knew exactly what they meant. And if you go back and watch those Naruto arcs now knowing the original story, the techniques hit completely differently. Yomi itself is simply dark, and the living world and Yomi are separated by one boulder, placed by a god who had just seen something he could not unsee.
Epilogue, life over death.
Every civilization that has ever existed decided that when you die, you go somewhere. And what they decided tells you more about how they understood life than how they understood death. The Greeks decided that most people end up in gray, purposeless drift, which tells you that the Greeks considered a life without distinction the closest thing to not having lived at all. The Egyptians decided that the worst possible outcome is complete obliteration, which tells you that the Egyptians considered existence itself the highest value and its end the ultimate punishment. The Norse decided that dying without glory is the closest thing to damnation, which tells you that the Norse measured a life entirely by how it ended. The Aztecs decided that moral behavior has nothing to do with your afterlife, which tells you that the Aztecs understood the universe as fundamentally indifferent to individual virtue. The Hindus decided that punishment is temporary and proportional, which tells you that the Hindu tradition understood justice as corrective rather than punitive. And the Japanese decided that the barrier between the living and the dead is one boulder, placed by a grieving husband who looked when he was told not to, which tells you that the Japanese understood the boundary between life and death as something personal, fragile, and maintained by a choice made in the dark. None of these is the Red Devil and Fire version most people picture when they hear the word hell. All of them are more interesting. Most of them are more disturbing. If you liked the video, don't forget to hit the subscribe button and follow for more.